Time to roll up the sleeves, time to get down to business, time to do some work, time to get some issues fixed in college football. The one paramount issue on the minds of most people around college football that if we polled everyone, I think this would be the number one issue, the number one topic that people want to see fixed. Here we are to fix it. MarkRogersTV, the voice of college football, breaking down the game we all love each and every day with you. And here we are to unveil our playoff system and to do it live with you so we can get the interaction. I'm not going to take any calls for a while. We will be taking calls a little bit later, but I am going to unveil my playoff system in detail. And of course, leave your comments in the live chat. Understand that this all works. This is all possible because of you. So we appreciate your individual contributions here at MarkRogersTV, the voice of college football, whether that be through the Super Chat, Venmo, PayPal, or Cash App. You can reach me at MarkRogersTV. Join us on Patreon for exclusive live streams, watch parties, and more. My exclusive predictions on Patreon, it's about 16 cents per day. All right, I'm waiting for a few more people to filter in, although more people are going to watch this as a replay on the Rewatch Squad than watch it live. So I'm not going to wait too long, but I appreciate everybody jumping on the line to check out our playoff system. All right, let's see who's on it currently. We got the Rod Farba, of course. Good to see you, the Rod Farba. Phil B., I would like an 18 playoff. I think that's enough spots to get a good group of 5 team in, plus no buys. Man, you're on the right track, Phil. Good for you. You're right there with us so far. I'm going to unveil my playoff system. And again, I'm not going to take any calls initially. I will take as many calls as many people want to call or leave comments in the live chat, either confirming my playoff system or asking questions or pushing back on my playoff system. Ballard, good to see you, man. Always. Lewis Papp. Lewis Papp likes and retweets just about everything I send on Twitter. So, Lewis, I thank you for that. I appreciate that. That is basically doing what I've asked the audience to do, our community to do. It's share the videos, and that's how he's doing it. All right, appreciate that. The Rod Farba, yes. Lewis Papp, no buys. The Rod Farba, no buys. And for anybody who jumps in here at some point and says, hey, we need a 16 playoff or we need a 10 or 12 team playoff, I'm sure I will have to go to the well on that one. All right, Eddie. Yeah, let's see this. Here we go. Ballard, Mark Rogers, the voice of college football, is the GOAT. I still, from time to time, hear some people have to be required of an explanation on that, but that is certainly a very kind of you, Ballard. Dalton from T-Town, I want home field advantage for the 1 through 4 C teams, no more neutral site games. And that's an interesting topic that I'm not going to hit on, but we can discuss it. So Dalton, that's good. That's a great debate in and of itself in regards to home field advantage in the playoffs. Lewis, great to see you again. Cancel enemy, hey. Great to see you. Go Bucks. Cancel enemy 16-team playoff is a horrible idea. Well, I don't know if it's horrible, but we're not going there. And then there's David, who wants a 16-team playoff. If we could do this all on paper and wouldn't get student athletes beat up, I would love 16 teams. I would love the 16 teams. If you guys want to check out the videos where I went through all the college football playoff seasons from 2014 through this past season, and I went through it in terms of what it would have looked like, and I'm going to do that a little bit more here, as an 8-team and a 16-team playoff. So a 16-team playoff based on the playoff committee's rankings, but also based on more logic and objectivity in placing those 16 teams. And the same thing with the 8-team playoff. The 16-team field is ridiculous, especially if you go by for as much as I can't stand it, the College Football Playoff Selection Committee, just because they rank the Power 5 teams and the name brand teams higher, the matchups are ridiculous. So check out those videos. I lined it all up, 8-team and 16-team playoff. All right, here we go. Let's get to it. This is what we're going to do. And I've got to admit to everybody out there, I wrestled and wrestled with the thought of include the group of 5 or not include the group of 5. And I think that there are great arguments on both sides. So for anybody who wants to come out and say, this is a Power 5 college football playoff, and it should be, because the Power 5 is decidedly, and in most instances, substantially better than the group of 5. For anybody out there that just wants to see a Power 5 college football playoff, I am not arguing with you. I'm not saying that that's not a good idea, a legit, credible idea. It is. I almost went that way. I wrestle back and forth with that because they are two different levels of football, by and large. But I'll let you know why I'm including the group of 5. So for those people that just say, tell the group of 5, go play your own playoff, do whatever you want, we are going to have a Power 5 playoff, I would be good with that as well. The bottom line decision that has to be made by somebody is include the group of 5, don't include the group of 5. Don't say that the group of 5 is under consideration and they're included but never select them. That's a tease. That's patronizing them. That's actually, bottom line, an insult to the group of 5. To say, you know what, we consider you, you're in our rankings, but when UCF goes 12-0, like it did in 2017, and going into the playoffs after the regular season and the conference championship games, UCF was number 12 in the country. They weren't even close to a playoff. We have seen multiple undefeated teams, Coastal Carolina, Cincinnati, UCF twice, with no chance, not even close to reaching that Final Four, that top 4 in the final playoff committee rankings. So the group of 5, there needs to be a clear-cut decision. Formally include them or formally exclude them. None of this in-between stuff. That's what we're doing right now. It's stupid. It makes no sense. Okay. All right. Not taking any calls. So please don't call. I will take calls. I am going to take calls, but right now, let me spit out the system. All right, here we go. 8 teams. For as much as I would like to see more football and see 16 teams, we're going with 8. 8 teams. Yes, we are going to include all the Power 5 conference champions. And I know that many people say, what about the Pac-12? The Pac-12 has been lousy for 3 or 4 years or more. A lot of people are going to say, well, there are teams that win conference championships, or this could have happened, or that could have happened. Okay. If we ran the numbers, because I've done it, we run the numbers for the last 20 years, we are not going to see any Power 5 champions that aren't reasonably deserving. The worst record for a Power 5 champion over the last 15 years is Washington a couple of years ago in the Pac-12 was 10-3. They were 10-3. And that's one. Before that, we'd have to go back to 2005. Florida State was 9-4. That's not a horrible deal. Look at the Power 5 champions year after year after year after year, especially during this college football playoff era. They're all 12-1 or undefeated or 11-2 at the worst. We are not going to have a not deserving conference champion. And even in a particular year, because it's going to happen maybe 1 out of every 10 years where we have a 9-4 conference champion, you know what? They earned it. They played in a Power 5 conference. They earned the championship. They won the championship game. They earned it. I have no issue with that. And the numbers will back me up that we are not going to see undeserving teams make the playoff under this system. All right. All the Power 5 champions are in. The best group of 5. So the system you're going to see right here is not a whole lot different than the systems that people have spit out all over the place. So I'm not reinventing the wheel, but what I'm going to do here is I'm going to bring clarification, because all sorts of people say, and I see Navy Thomas there in the live chat, he should be giving me thumbs up here because Navy Thomas loves when I get the whiteboard out. The best group of 5. So the issue that we have is everybody is saying, or most people are saying, give us the Power 5 champions, then give us a couple wild cards, either 3 wild cards without the group of 5 or give us 2 wild cards and a group of 5, but they are not determining how we select the wild cards or how we select the group of 5. That's what I'm going to bring clarification to. All right. The best group of 5 team is going to be selected this way. Team with the best record. That's all there is to it. Bam, team with the best record. And I know some people are going to go to scheduling here and say, well, we're penalizing teams that have better schedules. We're going to get to that in just a second. Hang on. Best record. So this past season was a mess. Let's not take this past season because teams were playing 7 games and 3 games and 12 games, and they were all over the place. So this past 2020 season, not a good determining example there, because we actually had 3 group of 5 teams with undefeated records: Coastal Carolina, Cincinnati, and San Jose State, and Coastal played the most games, so technically they would have won this. But we're going to go to the 12-game regular season and the 1-game conference championship, so these teams will have played 13 games. Go with the team flat out with the best record. Okay. We understand that a number of years there's going to be a tie for the best record in the group of 5. And usually that tie is going to be a 12-1. Most of the time, the best group of 5 team is 12-1, and then there's another 12-1. It came to fruition a number of times. I went through all the college football playoff seasons, 2014 through 20, and there's a tie a number of times. In 2019, Memphis, Boise State, Appalachian State all had 1 loss. 2014, you had a tie there as well in the group of 5. So anyway, you're going to have a group of 5. Actually, not as many ties as I thought. It was just the 1 season with ties for best record in the group of 5. The other 6 seasons, there was just 1 team with the best record in the group of 5. Whether that was UCF or Western Michigan, Houston. So the group of 5 in good shape. All right. So best record. And if there's a tie, head-to-head. Now, is that going to happen most of the time where there's a head-to-head meeting between the 2 best teams in the group of 5? No. So now we need another tiebreaker. Strength of record. Okay. We are not just taking the best strength of schedule, but we're combining that with a dominance factor. So we are taking the metric, and I'm not saying that this metric can't be improved or tweaked in a way, but I think it's relevant. I think it's credible. It basically measures the dominance against the quality of the schedule. So it's taking, so team A may play the tougher schedule, but they squeaked by everybody. And so a lot of people are in favor of strength of schedule, but maybe the team wasn't that dominant or decisive against that schedule. They squeaked by. They had a lot of close victories against that schedule. And it was a good schedule, but team B played a lesser schedule, but they were dominant. Well, we want a combination of those 2 things. We want a combination to factor in those 2 portions of the formula. Your dominance on the field versus quality of play, the quality of opponent. So that's going to be our determining factor if there's a tie and if there's not a head-to-head meeting. All right. 2 wild cards out of the Power 5. Here they go. Same difference. We're going to go with the same determining factors here. Best record, head-to-head, which actually comes up a few times. You'd be surprised in the Power 5 that came up a few times in looking at the last 7 years. And then strength of record again. So let's go to 2019. In 2019, you had LSU, Ohio State, Clemson, Oklahoma, and Oregon win the Power 5s. LSU, Ohio State, and Clemson were all undefeated. Oklahoma was 12-1. Oregon was 11-2. Okay. Your group of 5 rep would have either been Memphis, Boise State, or Appalachian State, all 12-1. That's when we would go to best record. Okay, they're all 12-1. Head-to-head, no head-to-head meetings. Strength of record, boom. Who would have won that? I didn't go through the process of trying to figure that out because that's why we've got computers. Okay. The wild cards in 2019 would come down to this. Georgia, Utah, Baylor. Georgia, Utah, Baylor. Okay. The other component here to consider that I think bypasses a lot of people is we can't penalize a team for losing a conference championship game. So let's say Wisconsin's 10-2 and TCU's 10-2, but TCU did not make the Big 12 championship game. Wisconsin went to the Big 10 championship game and lost to Ohio State by a field goal to go to 10-3. We can't penalize teams going to conference championship games and losing to the best teams in the country. So we would take that component out of it and we would look at regular season records. Okay? All right. And one major factor that's going to help all of this work, scheduling. If you get the scheduling right, then this means a lot more. Even if we applied this to what's going on right now, it would still be a much better playoff. It would be a fair, more equitable, more representative playoff. But if we get that fixed, and for anybody watching me right now that has not seen my scheduling concept, format, and formula, please check out the videos because I fixed the scheduling in conference and out of conference. Is it perfect? Of course, it's not perfect, but it's a reasonable, logical system. Can't be perfect because we can't predict the future. The only way that you could have perfect scheduling is if you can predict the future to know how good the teams are going to be that season. But you can at least make it fair. So we fixed the scheduling first, and as many folks have pointed out here, including Lewis and others, no buys in the playoff, and then we implement this system. And if anybody has yet to hear my explanation on the buys, I'm going to assume that everybody has heard my pitch to kill buys in the playoff. And if anybody wants to hear that explained, certainly call us up. I believe I've covered everything. I listed out, I went through from 2014 through 2020 on what the playoffs would look like every year based on the formula here. So we can get into that as well. I don't think I missed anything. I think that's the formula. Now, I want to hear from you. And for the first person that asks about Notre Dame, yes, it would help if Notre Dame actually joined a conference. It would help if they joined a conference. They would have made the playoff in, take out 2020 real quick, just because the records are all over the place because teams play different numbers of games. But Notre Dame would have made the playoff, of course, in 2018. So they're automatically taking up that wild card spot. And that is the only other year Notre Dame would have made the playoff. Would have been 2018 and, of course, 2020. All right, Mark Rogers TV, the voice of college football. I'm going to address the live chat. I see a lot of great comments in there. And I'm always excited to do this stuff. I love this stuff. Love it. And you're going to have some great comebacks to this. I'm sure there's going to be a number of people that are going to bring up really good thoughts that shoot this down to a certain extent, and that's why we're here. I don't mind that. Yeah, Lenny, this is your Zoom class, so take credit for it and tell your professor, hey, I already took a Zoom class this week, got it done from the voice of college football. All right, let's get this thing going. Mark Rogers TV, the voice of college football. Who's on the line?
Navy Thomas 8, second time to call you. Boom on this video.
This is the best person possible to be calling right now. My longest active subscriber and the guy who loves when I break out the whiteboard.
Number one for me is cut that 8 teams crap pile. It needs to be cut out.
To what?
You go with you gotta go with just the Power 5 champs, and you've got to cut it down to 4 teams.
Wait a minute.
So
wait, if we get all the Power 5 champs in, that's 5 teams.
I'm looking at your board right in front of me.
Yeah.
8 teams champs.
Yes, there are 5 of those.
But there's only 4.
There's
You can't make the Pac-12 as one of the top 5 champs.
You just said
Because they won't change their schedule where we can see it early in the morning. Maybe for them they have to start at, I don't know, 10:30 in the morning, 11:30 in the morning. But this 3:30 crap after the other games are over with, who cares? What does the Pac-12 have to show? Because they don't play anybody, just the Pac-12, and then all the scrubs, USF, US, all those West Coast teams, scrubs that are conference too, that they keep playing. I'm fed up of them because they're not displaying, USC and UCLA. Oh yeah, we get that at 8 o'clock at night their time, and over here in the Central Time, it's 10 o'clock, and I'm like, I'm not watching it. So 2 wild cards, you go 8 teams, Power 5, add 2 wild cards, so that makes it 10. Dude, it's not going to work. So you go to 10 teams.
Okay. All right. Navy Thomas.
There's no way they can make it work out, dude. But
yes, we can make it work. We can make it work. It can work. It's not that difficult. It's not rocket science. We're dealing with low numbers here. It can work. So the Pac-12 does play decent football, not great football, but they play decent football, so they need to be included. And even if you don't include them, so you want to include the other 4 conference champions, but not the Pac-12.
8 teams, Power 5 champs, and if they are defeated before, they don't belong in the conference. So then if you want to add the wild cards, which is Notre Dame, who doesn't play anybody, although, yeah, they go out to USC and play them, and they go all over the place to play these unconference teams of them. They're not part of the ACC. So cut the Notre Dame and kick them to the curb until they join a conference. Join the ACC, SEC, Big Ten, Pac-10, Pac-12, whatever. Then go down to the Big 12 and join there. I'm just...
All right, Navy Thomas.
Throw Notre Dame out the door, dude.
Okay, hang with my system here. It's a decent one. All right. Appreciate the call, Tom.
All right, buddy. Talk to you later.
All righty. All right, we had a few people standing by. Please call back. Okay. So again, all right, step-by-step, brother Jay Blaze. Good to see you right here. MarkRogersTV, the voice of college football. Here you go. 8 teams, all 5 Power 5 conference champs. I know there's pushback on that based on a weak team winning a conference. If you go back for 15 or 20 years, the worst you're going to find is Florida State, 2005 at 9-4. The worst during the playoff era, Washington, 10-3. Just doesn't happen. You got 1 and 2 loss conference champions almost more than 90% of the time. So we're going to have all the conferences represented by the champions. Therefore, nobody can cry, because another pushback against the 8 teams is that a number of people say, well, you can expand to 8, and then number 9 and 10 are going to complain, but they don't have a right to complain like they do now. Right now, teams have legitimate rights to complain, and they have a legitimate argument to complain, because we have conferences that don't get represented. In this system, the the response to anybody who says we didn't get a chance or we didn't get put in and we're number 9, the response is win your conference. If you win your conference, you're in. Okay. And we still include the 2 wild cards. And then there's an objective system, even for the wild cards, even if a wild card team, let's say Penn State and Georgia and Texas and somebody else go 10-2, but we can only include 2 of them. Well, at least we have an objective process to do that. And we can say, we didn't just have 13 people go in a room and come out and tell you, well, Texas and Penn State are going to make it. Screw Georgia and the other team I just said. Screw the other 10-2 teams. We picked these 10-2 teams. No, we will be able to say, okay, we took the teams with the best record. So we had 4 10-2 teams. We could only take 2. So then we went head-to-head. And there is a season here in which Minnesota and Penn State both went 10-2, but Minnesota won the head-to-head. And Georgia and Florida that same season both went 10-2 in the regular season, and Georgia won 2 years ago. So that would break the tie. But if we don't have that, then we go to strength of record. So again, for whomever asked that, 5 Power 5 teams, 2 wild cards out of the Power 5, and the group of 5 I'm including. I wrestled with that. I was very upfront about that right out of the gate, that I wrestled with that because the Power 5 is substantially better than the group of 5 in its totality. But think of how many teams in the group of 5 are better than teams in the Power 5. There's too much of an overlap for us just to say, you know what, we're going to make the Illinois and the Rutgers and the Kansases of the world eligible for this playoff, but not UCF and Boise State and Houston and a bunch of schools that have proven year after year after year after year that they can be more competitive than probably 20 to 25 teams in the Power 5. So there's so much of an overlap that I believe it's reasonable to say we're going to give out 8 playoff spots that are going to be earned. 8. We'll give 1 to the group of 5. All right. I'm going to go through some of these comments. Cinnamon 06, 16 teams. Power 5 leagues would have 2 or 3 slots each based on seeding. Okay. Again, what's a little bit different than my system than other people's that have proposed the same thing. 5 Power 5 champs, 2 wild cards, best group of 5. Is I actually broke down how we're going to decide the wild cards and how we're going to decide the best of the group of 5. So a lot of people say, yeah, let's have wild cards and let's do this. But how do you decide them? We don't want any more committees. We don't need committees deciding. We don't need 13 people in a room deciding the fate of college football. Mark Rogers TV, the voice of college football, who's on the line.
Hey, Mark, what's up? This is Dave. Big time.
Hey, Dave. How are you?
I'm fine. And yourself?
I am doing well. What's going on?
Right on. Hey, just watching some of the comments in the side chat. I know that Notre Dame plays a horrible schedule every year, and I also understand that we cannot ever beat any good teams. I don't see a whole lot of teams knocking off Clemson and Alabama, so please excuse us for being inferior. Also, I like your format. I think it's great. I never like being associated with the ACC because their football is weak. Outside of UNC, Miami, of course, Clemson. If I had my druthers, and this is just like a wish list, I'd like to see Notre Dame land in the Big Ten West Conference. Surely don't want to be in the East. That'd be awful. But I think that would bring a little bit of leveling of those 2 sub-conferences within the Big Ten Conference. Also, from a logistics and geographical standpoint, it would make more sense. Notre Dame's basketball team, they're okay at times, but I think they would mesh well with the Big Ten. I just think, man, that would work out great. And then, you can somewhat start to eliminate the naysayers to say, like, oh, you guys suck in your scheduling. And you mentioned this before. Just
schedule your teams 6 to 7 years ahead of time. And, well, at some point in time, they were good when you schedule them, and now not so good. But what do you want me to do about that? Not me, per se, but what do you want the athletic department to do about that? Because they were good at some point. But what do you think about them being in the – I'm not saying it would happen. I'd like to see it happen in my lifetime, but in the Big Ten West.
I've always said that Notre Dame should be in the Big Ten. There are three of their biggest rivals are in the conference, whom they used to play every year, as you well know, Michigan, Michigan State, and Purdue. And look at the location of the school. It's right in the middle of Indiana, smack dab in the middle of Big Ten country. Just from a football standpoint, historically, in regards to the reputation of the program and its history and its traditions and everything, it just reeks of Big Ten. It would be a perfect fit in the Big Ten.
Also, Mark, you know, like I just saw, okay, said Notre Dame was unlikely to join the Big Ten. They've had 100 years to do so. Well, they tried in the past, and there was, what was that dude from Michigan, his last name is Yost. He did everything he could to prevent Notre Dame from being in the Big Ten when they did want to participate in that conference. And so, like, when I got up when you're younger, you're talking about stuff you don't know about, which I don't mean that as an insult. If you don't know, you just don't know. But they did try to get in the past, and I think there at the end, the last time they were offered, they were like thinking, hey, you know what, we tried so hard in the past to get in here, and now you want us to join, never mind. So what do you think about that?
Well, yeah, you're speaking of Fielding Yost, and that's ancient history, and it really has should have no bearing on what happens now. These old grudges from years gone by, decades, generations gone by, and I think the same thing I just explained, that from I can't speak to the academics. I won't even speak much to the other sports, even though I've covered them in the past. I will just speak from a football standpoint. Notre Dame is just a phenomenal fit for the Big Ten.
I agree. I'd like to see him in there. And, you know, I don't really see, Mark, if you think there's just like a handful of teams that are independent now. It's Brigham Young. I think maybe one or two of the service academies, Liberty. I mean,
yes.
Hey, you know what? Why not just fall into place with everybody else, pick a spot, and make the best of it? Give it a try. And if at some point in time you feel like something's not working out, then when your contract's over, leave.
Yeah, the likes of Liberty, they belong in, let's say, Conference USA or the Sun Belt. They would be a perfect fit for that. Liberty, you've got UMass could be in the MAC. UMass was in the MAC conference at one point. Yes. Yeah, we're down to, like you say, 5 or 6 schools. So just get them in a conference.
So what's the point?
Yeah, it's that they're just stragglers hanging out there. And BYU's in a particularly bad spot because they're never going to be able to prove with their schedule. They're kind of hanging in limbo in regards to being viewed as a Power 5 or a Group of 5, but they won't have enough juice to ever get selected to a playoff.
Yeah. Well, I'll tell you what, they're probably nowhere closer to get into the national championship scene with the way things are going. Look, for all the people like to point the finger at Notre Dame and say, you guys can't win your big games. Well, it's no more apparent to anybody when you're an absolute Notre Dame fan. We're more frustrated about that than everybody else is saying, you guys don't deserve to be here. You guys don't deserve to be there. We already know that. But I think that if our record demonstrates us to get in there, well, then you're not going to turn it down. But the other thing is that I don't know. I think in the Brian Kelly area, I know one time he's beating his head against the wall thinking, like, what do I got to do to get in here and win? Well, hey, Coach, maybe you need to change a little bit. And that's just me. And, you know, I'm not the alchemist of college football. So I do like your scheme that you created. And I think it's very viable. And I think it would really could work. I think it would make it a lot more interesting for a lot of people. And I know you put a lot of work in that. So kudos. And is there anything to say? But otherwise, I'm going to let somebody else dial in.
Thank you, David. Have a good night. Always appreciate it, sir.
You too.
Brother Jay Blaze, what about the divide and the college football playoff into 2 divisions and then make a national championship out of that? Well, we kind of already have that. We get the Power 5 and the Group of 5. And we could just say, Group of 5, go play your own playoff. And that's one way to do it. And I am in no way saying this is the system and it's the only one that works. Because I very much wrestled with excluding the Group of 5. And for those of you who were not here off the top and have not heard me say this in the past, I just want something definitive to be done with a Group of 5. Do not tease them, patronize them, bottom line, insult them by saying, we consider you for the playoff and we put you in the rankings. You're going to be 11 and 18 and 25, but you're not going to make the playoff because that's what it is. They are not going to make the playoff. When UCF goes 12-0 and wins a conference championship and is number 12 in the country, 8 spots away, and consider those 8 spots are monumental leaps to take, to be leaping those teams that they would have had to leap in 2017. The playoff committee is basically telling the Group of 5, you don't have a chance. You can't make it. It will be fascinating this year if Cincinnati runs the table in conference and beats Indiana and Notre Dame. 3 things need to happen here. Cincinnati needs to finish undefeated in the American Conference. Cincinnati needs to defeat Indiana and Notre Dame. And then number 3, Indiana and Notre Dame need to have really stellar seasons. You know, at least 9-3, 10-2. Show themselves to be top 10 to 15 in the country. And then I really want to see what the committee's going to do with Cincinnati if those 3 things can happen. Undefeated conference season, beat Indiana, Notre Dame, and then have Indiana and Notre Dame turn out to be really good teams. You know, can you imagine? This would be phenomenal. Cincinnati does all that. Indiana wins the Big Ten championship. Loses to Cincinnati, wins the Big Ten championship. Cincinnati's undefeated. Roy Boy, good to see you, Notre Dame fan. Appreciate that. Please hit the like button if you enjoy what we do. Even if you don't agree with me, that's not the end of the world. That's why we're here. Discussion, debate, analysis. The only thing I will promise is that I will think things through and I will try to apply logic and understanding, and I typically know what I'm talking about. But is my way the perfect way? No, it's not. Is my scheduling format perfect? No, because you can't foresee the future. And I would encourage everybody to check out at least one of the scheduling videos. I did the SEC, the ACC, the Big Ten, and the Pac-12. The reason I left out the Big 12 is because they've got a 10-team conference and they play everyone. So they've got it down. That's all there needs to be done. They already play a fair schedule, the Big 12. We can make fun of the Big 12 for a number of reasons, but we can't when it comes to scheduling. They play the perfect, most pure championship. Everybody plays everybody. Not so in the other 4 conferences, so I had to fix the conference scheduling, and then I fixed the out-of-conference scheduling. So check out those videos, at least one of the conference schedules, and then where it says Big Ten scheduling fix, Check that out. Or non-conference scheduling fix. Please check out that video. And I said at the end of those videos, if you want me to build a schedule to prove that my formula will work, get us to 10,000 views on one of those videos, and I will build the schedule. Mike 3883, adding 4 more spots is legitimately inviting every team more. 8 and 4 are not the same caliber. Sentiments in 06, BYU somehow won the 85, it was the 84 national championship while playing in the Holiday Bowl, and a 6-5 Michigan team, yes. Mike 3883, YouTube issue, the highlighted chat. It's cut off the screen. Is that still an issue? Anyone? I don't even know what he's talking about exactly. The highlighted chat. Huh. D-Rock. D-Rock Irish, good to see you. Cheryl, it's a rough crowd. Well, we've kind of had a lag after the college football season. Everybody's just kind of... So we're firing things up, getting things done here tonight. Okay, all right. Any other good comments in here? I'm looking. Anything else need to be addressed? Maybe Thomas is telling me that I've lost my mind. Oh, a lot of people love that soccer model from Europe. Drop the good, take the good big, take the really good group of 5 teams, lift them up into the Power 5 and vice versa. I think that's awful. Maybe Thomas. 5 teams. It's the Power 5 plus the 2 wild cards plus 1 group of 5. The best group of 5. That's 8. MSU #1 fan, Michigan State in 2013 should have played for the BCS title. Your thoughts? Okay. My thoughts are neither yes nor no. This is why. Another reason why we needed a playoff system. Because the BCS was screwed up. There were many seasons in the BCS era from 98 through 13 in which the BCS just flat out got it wrong. When Texas and Oklahoma both go 11-1, and Oklahoma won the game on the field. No. Texas won the game on the field in 08, and Oklahoma went to the BCS championship game. How does that make any sense? You had 2 teams, they play in the same conference, meaning their schedules are very similar, and one of them wins the game on the field head-to-head. They've got the same record, and the BCS selects the team that lost the game. Okay, that happened in 2008. That happened in 2000, where Miami and Florida State both only had 1 loss. Miami beat Florida State. Florida State got selected by the BCS. I could go on and on about the BCS screwing things up a number of times. But even when the BCS came out with a result that made sense, where you could say, okay, these 2 teams have earned or deserve a shot at the title, there was almost always a 3rd team, a 4th team, a 5th team that had just as much claim as the #2 team to make it. And that's what you're talking about right there. So the way I answer this question is, did the Spartans of 2013 deserve to play in the BCS championship game? Yes. Auburn was 12-1. won the SEC. Michigan State was 12-1, won the Big Ten. Michigan State lost to Notre Dame in a very close game, one-score game on the road in South Bend. Ton of pass interference calls, bogus pass interference calls. Michigan State's one loss. And they finished the season by beating the number 2 team in the country, Ohio State, in the Big Ten championship game. 12-1, Big Ten champs. Auburn beat Alabama, beat Missouri, beat a lot of good teams. We're fortunate, but beat a lot of good teams. Lost by 2 touchdowns to LSU. Finished 12-1, won the SEC. So if Michigan State had been selected to go to the BCS championship game, then I would have been answering your question exactly the opposite way. I would have said, well, Michigan State deserved to play in the BCS championship game that year, but Auburn did as well. That's why we need a playoff. MarkRogersTV, the voice of college football. Who's on the line?
Hey, Mark Rogers. It's Ballard. How you doing tonight?
Hey, Ballard. What's going on?
Not much. I just made a comment in your comment section.
Yeah, I'll try to find it.
And I want to clarify it because when I went back and read it, it might have looked or sounded confusing. So basically what I was trying to say, I'm not sure if you saw my comment yet, but
No.
I was basically saying, as far as teams for the playoffs, right? So the college football playoff is obviously, if we even tried to consider teams like Coastal Carolina or BYU last year, you know, which they're, as we know, they're not Power 5, they're more Group of 5. That fits in the FBS. That's the FBS college football playoff. I think any team should be obviously eligible or given a chance, but obviously with the protocol that we have now, strength of schedule, head-to-head records, and everything like that, you know, and you take maybe the best 8 teams, or maybe if you, I've heard people say expanded to 6 teams and just add 2 extra teams in there or whatever. But basically what I'm saying is, as long as anybody, like, you know, and I mentioned like Coastal Carolina or whoever, like, if they had a good resume last year, they didn't really play anybody. They didn't play any good competition. They still won like 11 games or whatever. But let's say they were, and this is obviously hypothetically speaking, but let's say they beat up on teams like, you know, like if they had just beat up on ranked teams or whatever, that would have been a good case for them, but they didn't. But what I'm trying to say is, you know, teams like BYU, Cincinnati, who are these Group of 5 schools, you know, shouldn't be left out just because they're not a Power 5 team, is what I'm trying to say. If they have the resume and the record, they should be given a chance.
Sure. And so that's what this system gives. But I don't think they should be given, I don't think anybody thinks that they should be given as much of the slice of the pie as the Power 5 because it's inferior football overall. Now, it would be different if, Ballard, for me, it would be different, and I don't know if you heard me say this, it was a difficult decision for me to make to either include the Group of 5 or just say, we're going to make a Power 5 playoff, and the Group of 5, go do whatever you want to. I almost made that decision. Right. I almost made that call. Some people are saying that, and I don't argue with them. But I would be completely inclined to do that and would do that if every team in the Power 5 was consistently better than every team in the Group of 5. If there was a complete divide, like you could take the worst team in the group, the Power 5 every year, Kansas, Rutgers, whoever it was, and they were better than UCF, Houston, Boise State, whomever was the best in the Group of 5. But that's not even close. Yeah. Those teams are way better than Kansas and Oregon State or whomever's the worst. Those teams are so much better. They overlap by 20 or 25 or 30 teams into the Power 5.
Yeah.
So because that's the case, I want to include them.
Right.
Now, in terms of Coastal Carolina last year, I guess it depends on who you consider to be a good team or not a good team. They beat Louisiana and they beat BYU. Are they good teams?
I mean, they look like one, but I mean, you were to compare that to maybe Ohio State, Clemson, Bama, or whoever got in, or maybe even a team like maybe Georgia, like, you know, who did you play? You might have won 15, 16 games or whatever the record was. I think actually more like 11, but
yeah.
I mean, what is that? I mean, who did you play? How weak or how strong was your schedule? And again, I mean, I think you and I were talking about this the other day, like, for that particular team.
Yeah, absolutely. You got anything else for me?
No, that's it. Thank you.
Thanks, Ballard. Appreciate it.
Okay.
Husker Tim, really not talking Nebraska football right now, but I will jump in on this one. Do I think there's any chance that Scott Frost does what he did with UCF at Nebraska, meaning go undefeated? I think there's basically zero chance. And I hate to be discouraging to Nebraska fans because I think Nebraska football is needed in college football. I think it's legendary what's been accomplished in Nebraska, and I don't like to see a former great program just kind of middling along and getting beat up and winning 4 and 5 games a year. But it's just a different day and age in college football, and it's Nebraska might be the toughest job in the country when you measure expectations versus what's reasonable. Might be the toughest job in the country. John Sarian, I wonder how many folks that make up the AP would feel about Mark's plan. Makes their marginally meaningful ranking totally useless. Records and head-to-head have less to do with writers' rankings. Yeah, there's other ways to do this, but I just think it's pretty logical that, and again, right now, the best record is not as credible as it would be if we fix the scheduling. If you fix the scheduling, then the records are more meaningful because everybody's playing. So, for example, I don't know if everybody or anybody out there caught this stat that I threw out a couple times during different videos. Since 1997, listen to this. Just let this sink in. 1997, Baylor has not played anybody out of conference who was ranked. They have played no ranked teams out of conference. 0. Baylor. USC has played 24. USC has lined up in the last 23 years against Notre Dame every year in the non-conference, plus home and homes with Ohio State, and they played Alabama multiple times, and they played all these teams. They played Florida State and Arkansas and just all sorts of good teams across the board, all over the place. USC has played 24 ranked teams since 1997 out of conference, and Baylor has played none. Now, how do you evaluate? That's why we fixed the scheduling first, and then this means something. And USC wasn't even the example. There might be teams that have played more ranked non-conference. I just plucked out USC thinking they've played a lot of non-conference games against ranked teams. I'm going to count how many they've played since 1997 because Baylor hasn't played one ranked team since 1997. So I'm going to count up USC. I'm sure if we counted up Florida State, Clemson, and Ohio State, and Alabama, and all of them, they would have tons more. But USC, when it comes to scheduling, you got to hand it to USC. Notre Dame every year. Then they add somebody else on. Ohio State, back-to-back years, 08, 09. Alabama this past season. Alabama in 16. All right, the schedule fix, Dalton. Go watch the videos. We post these videos so you watch the videos. Okay, Dalton. All right. All right. Dalton, let me give you one example of why this needs to be fixed. And this is just one example of hundreds. In 2013, okay, you got Alabama, you got LSU playing in the same division. So they play each other. That's one game. They play in the same division, so they play the 5 teams in that division. So 6 out of 8 of LSU and Alabama's schedule in the SEC is exact. That's great. 6 of the 8. The other 2, though, in that particular season, Alabama played Tennessee and Kentucky, who went 1-15 in the SEC the previous season. LSU played Georgia and Florida, who went 14-2. Now, how is it fair for 2 teams to compete for a division championship when they play the exact same 6 teams, but then the other 2, one team plays 2 teams that are 1-15, the other team plays 2 teams that are 14-2? How is that fair? Well, my system would correct that. We would preserve the meaningful rivalries in conference play, but everyone would get a 500 schedule. Everyone would get a 500 composite schedule. So that's my quick summary of the conference scheduling fix. The out-of-conference scheduling fix, whether you go with an 8-game conference season or a 9-game conference season, you're going to have either 3 non-conference games or 4 non-conference games. Let the schools take scheduling out of the schools' hands. It's ridiculous that schools are running around scheduling their own games. That's what results in Baylor scheduling nobody and USC scheduling an NFL schedule. None of that. We want teams playing fair, equitable schedules so we can properly evaluate them and select the playoff teams. Or the system actually selects teams, not people. So for the non-conference scheduling fix, whether it's 2 non-conference games or 3 non-conference games, everybody plays a 500 schedule from the previous season. So let's say your team's Oklahoma. We want Oklahoma, we select Oklahoma to play Oregon in non-conference play. And Oregon went 10-2 last year. So the other team Oklahoma is going to play is going to be a 2-10 team. They're going to have a 500 non-conference schedule. Okay. And I explain it beyond that. And it works. I worked it out. I figured it out. So I'm not proposing things that can't be accomplished. They can't be executed. They can be. It's all feasible. Okay. So hopefully that answers your question. Alfred the Savage. 18 playoff, 1 should play 4, and 5 should play 8. 1, 4, 2, 7. Yeah, like a standard format. Now, the one thing I didn't address, and I will be very upfront about this, I didn't address seedings. There's a lot of ways you can do seedings. You could say that the group of 5 team automatically, regardless of how good they are, that they're undefeated, they're always going to be the 8 seed. I don't necessarily know if that's the way to go. You could say that the Power 5 champions earned those top 5 seeds. Maybe not. If you've got a wild card that's better than one of the group of, or one of the Power 5 champions, I got no issue. There's a number of ways to do seedings that that are fair. That I'm not a stickler for seedings, even though the seedings are important. They're important. Like if we're always going to stick the group of 5 with the 8 seed, then it's going to be even tougher, much tougher for them to advance in the playoffs, of course, because they're always going to play the number 1 team in the country. So that may not be fair to the group of 5, but you're eventually going to have to beat 3 really good teams to win a national championship anyway. So the seedings are important. Mm-hmm. The other portion of this is where the games are going to be played. And so, to somebody's earlier point in the chat about on-campus games, how about this? For those people who say if you expand the playoff, you're going to have games late in the season that are not meaningful, I've got 2 responses for you. Number 1, do you understand that if you expand the playoff, there are more games that are meaningful late in the season. Do you understand? If you look at the last 2 to 3 weeks of the college football season, there's a very few games that are meaningful to the playoff. If you expand the playoff, you're going to have more candidates vying for a playoff spot. So you're actually going to have more meaningful games because people are too focused on the couple teams, and there's usually only 1 or 2 that could lose the last game of the season and still make the playoff. They're too focused on that team or those 2 teams that could lose the last game of the regular season and still make the playoff, and say, well, if we expand the playoff, we're going to have less meaningful games because look at Alabama could just say, yeah, we'll just lose to Auburn, we don't care, and we'll still make the playoff. Well, they did that 2 years ago in 2017 anyway. If you expand the playoff, actually you create a larger field of teams that have a shot to get into it. So there's more meaningful games being played late in the season. Number 1, okay? And shoot, I got off track. I forgot my other good point in regards to expanding the playoffs for the people that say there are going to be less meaningful games. All right. Bingo, Austin. It seems like there's never going to be a perfect system in a league with 130 teams. Yeah. Yes. So, yeah. Shoot, I wish I could remember my other point. Thank you so much, John. Appreciate that. You guys have been around YouTube for long enough to know that the like button does matter. It really in no way strokes my ego. It's all about YouTube algorithms. So if we can get people to watch the videos, and number 2, we can get them to watch for a long time, and then number 3, get them to engage in the video either by commenting or liking or both, hopefully, then it churns up the YouTube algorithms, and we want these videos to get in the suggested video column, and therefore it's pushed out into traffic and people watch them. I am kicking for myself for not remembering my other point in regards to expansion of the playoff and the meaningful aspect of the games, because it's a point that I've made about 1,800 times in the past anyway, but for some reason it's escaped me. All right, we got Stephen Smith here. Appreciate you. Thank you so much for the Super Chat contribution. Would expanding it to 16 be too much, or is 8 a perfect fit for the playoffs? All right. I believe that the main consideration against 16 teams is the taxing physically and mentally of the student athlete. So we can pull out whiteboards and spreadsheets and we can concoct playoff systems on paper, but there's flesh and blood that have to go out there and beat themselves up and play. So I take some consideration to that. That, I think, is the number 1 knock against 16 teams. Other than that, I think that, yeah, the regular season does need to still hold a lofty place. The regular season still needs to be very, very valuable. And going to 16, the way I would go to 16, if I was going to go to 16, I would do it this way. And a lot of people aren't going to like this because it's not going to involve the 16 best teams in the country. But if we go to 16, the way I would do it going to 16 would be to include the group of 5. And I mean to really include the group of 5. So it's almost an NCAA men's basketball tournament kind of concept in which all the conference champions make it. So that's 10 now. because you got the Power Five, plus the MAC, the Sun Belt, the Mountain West, Conference USA, and the American. So you got 10 conference champions and then 6 wild cards. So basically, if you think about it, in a 16-team playoff in which you include all the conference champions, 10, 6 wild cards, you're basically ensuring that the 11 best teams in the country will be in the playoff, will be in the 16-team playoff. The 11 best teams will be there because they're the Power 5 champs and the 6 wild cards. But those 5 group of 5 champions are, in a typical year, what? The American champion is about the 18th best team in the country. And the Sun Belt champs may be the 45th best team in the country. And the Conference USA champ is maybe the 62nd best team in the country. And the MAC champ is maybe the 68th best team in the country. So you're going to have teams competing in the playoffs under that format who are truly not the 16 best, but we are rewarding them for earning a conference championship and therefore a playoff spot. Or you could just do it where we're going to take the Power 5 and we're going to take the next best 11. And those would probably include 10 Power 5s, definitely 9 Power 5s, and then 2 from the group of 5. You could do it that way. But then you got to figure out a system that's equitable and that's objective. I want to get away from committees just picking. I'm amazed at how many people are accepting of the committee just selecting 4 teams. I don't know how many times I hear after the national championship game, well, the committee got it right. They got the 4 right just because there were 4 teams playing in a tournament and somebody won. That doesn't mean they got it right. Yeah, games were played and somebody had to win the games. That doesn't mean they got it right. If the committee is so good at what they do, they would have selected the national champion to be the 1 seed more than 2 out of 7 times. You realize that the committee not only selects the 4 best teams, they're selecting 1, 2, 3, 4. So that is their determination. Just like they are separating 4 from 5 and kicking somebody out and including 4, they're selecting the 4 best. Therefore, if they're accurate, the 1 seed should win the national championship. Well, that's only happened twice out of 7 years. Mark Rogers TV, the voice of college football, who's on the line?
Hi, Mark. This is Anthony. How are you?
Hey, Anthony. I'm doing well. What's going on?
Mark, I have this question applies to your subject right now with the playoff system.
Okay.
I'm not sure if you like the idea of maybe mixing I like the idea of having at-large bids. I want to put at-large bids inside the college football playoff. Can that work? Mixing a little bit of something that was successful with the BCS into the college football playoff system, or that would be too convoluted to actually work.
Wait a minute. You're telling me in the BCS system that there were at-large teams that made the BCS championship game?
No, at-large, like having at-large bowls, at-large bowl game, like a team who had a. Wait a minute. Am I mistaking college basketball for college football? Am I thinking of college basketball that does that for the NCAA tournament, or did the BCS do that too?
Well, if you're looking at my system here, I do have 2 at-large teams making it.
Yeah, that's what I mean. Like, to create more parity, do you think it would benefit having at-large teams, maybe from the power? Let's say a team like a 2-loss or a 1-loss Big Ten team, or SEC team, for example.
how am I going to explain? This is just so confusing. Let's say two undefeated group of 5 teams. There's two undefeated group of 5 teams, but there's one loss Big 12, Big 10, or Pac-12, or ACC or SEC team. How would it work? Would the undefeated teams actually, since they went perfect throughout the season, they would get the benefit of the doubt, or the one-loss ACC or the one-loss Power 5 teams would actually get more of the benefit of the doubt, stuff like that.
Are you talking about in my system?
Yeah, in your system.
Okay, in my system, you just said that there were 2 group of 5 teams that went undefeated?
Yes, went undefeated.
Yeah.
But you looked at their strength of schedule,
Yep.
it wasn't matched up to the one-loss teams from the Pac-12, the Big 10,
Okay.
the Big 12, the
Well,
ACC, the SEC.
so under my system, what the group of 5 team did versus the Power 5 teams, there's no connection there. There's always going to
so
be
your system,
there's always going to be the Power 5 champions making the field, and there's always going to be a group of 5 team make the field. So there's no comparison that needs to be made. None.
even though the one-loss team,
There's no comparison that needs to be
close
made.
in the
The
championship.
The 5 conference champions will always make the field, and the best group of 5 will always make the field. So, no, there's no comparison between them. What comparison has to be made?
Oh, okay. So you're saying even though I'm looking at the strength of schedule is what I'm saying throughout the year.
Yeah.
The group of 5 teams don't really have a good strength of schedule because the teams they're facing are not. The conferences are more top heavy. Won't you say, like in the Big 12, you're facing each other every day, every game or something like that, where there's not a conference where they set divisions is what I'm saying. Where compared to like some of the group of 5 conferences where they have different divisions and the teams are not facing each other every year is what I'm saying. That's what my question was. Do you think in your system that wouldn't matter because they didn't have a division like the Pac-12, the Big 12 would actually be affected more from not having divisions and constantly facing each other and stuff like that?
All right, Anthony.
Hurting
The Power 5 champions are all making the playoffs. So nobody needs to think about anything. There's no thought process involved. If you win the Big 10, you're in the playoff. If you win the Pac-12, you're in the playoff. Nobody needs to compare anything or think about anything.
I'm talking about the one-loss teams who didn't win their championship.
Okay, all right.
Compare.
Yes. Okay, we are giving one of those spots to the best group of 5 team. The best group of 5 team is determined by their record. And if that's a tie between 2 teams, then we go to the head-to-head. If they played, if they didn't play, then we go to their strength of record. And the team with the best strength of record gets that playoff spot.
Okay, so if the group of 5 team played more Power 5 teams, for example, UCF or something like that goes undefeated, but in their schedule they had to win against a team like, for example, a Georgia or an Oklahoma on their schedule. Would their strength of schedule be a little bit better, even though the Power 5 are constantly beating up on each other, the Power 5 conferences and stuff like that?
Yes, most likely if a group of 5 team beats somebody the caliber of Georgia, their strength of schedule is going to be strong. Or stronger.
Okay. Then Georgia, who's going against Alabama, a Florida, LSU, an Auburn, or a
Who's it? Who's the other team? Alabama or something like that. That's what I'm saying. Like, even though Georgia has a gauntlet schedule against teams like LSU, Alabama, Florida, and stuff like that. That's what I'm wondering.
Okay.
Even though that they have a tougher gauntlet going into the ACC, even though they would have that one loss against a team like UCF, the head-to-head would go to UCF, even though Georgia has a tougher road in the schedule.
There's no comparison between Anthony. Don't make this any more complicated than it is. It's very clear cut. You have 5 Power 5 conferences. If you win a Power 5 conference, you're in the playoff. There's 5 spots. You don't need to make any comparisons between anybody. Okay?
Okay.
All right.
Okay.
If you take all the group of 5 teams, and the team with the best record goes to the playoffs. And I have just outlined that in the 6 years of the playoff prior to 2020, there was just one team in the group of 5, 1 year in which we would have to match up teams with the same record. In all the other years, there was only one team in the group of 5 that always had the best record.
UCF.
Regardless of who it is, the team with the best record in the group of 5 gets a playoff spot.
Okay. Even though the strength of schedule for a one-loss SEC or ACC team is better.
There is no connection. There is no connection between the Power 5 champions making the playoffs and a group of 5 team getting one spot. You don't need to make any comparisons. There are no comparisons to be made. None.
Okay,
Zero.
No. Let me clarify what I mean. I'm not talking about the champions I'm fine with. I'm talking about the one-loss teams.
There's no comparison between those either. The group of 5 gets one spot. So the only comparisons that have to be made are between group of 5 teams.
Oh, okay, so you're not comparing Power 5 conference teams to group of 5. It's more the group of 5 teams to each other's strength of schedule is what you're saying.
Yes, the group of 5 gets one spot.
Okay. Thank you for clarifying. It was a little bit confusing when you were explaining it earlier. That's why
My apologies.
Thank you so much.
Thanks, Anthony. I always appreciate the call.
Okay, have a good day.
I understand I may not explain this the best all the time. Sometimes I do, sometimes I don't. All right. Yeah, regardless, Texas goes 7-5. D-Rock. Oh, you can have dinner and watch the show. You can listen to us, D-Rock Irish. I actually made myself a couple of, Gouda Vibe burgers. They were really good. HelloFresh taught me how to make them. They were really good. Austin, how would you rank the teams and schedule the playoff games in your system? All right, that's a great question. Excellent question. I will get to that in just a second.
The call will start at the beep.
It's MarkRogersTV, the voice of college football. Who's on the line?
Maybe Thomas Aid again.
Oh, boy.
I've got an answer for you.
Okay.
Let's go back to 64 teams into the board, just like basketball, and let's play 64 teams, and they can do it, I don't know, every other game to play football?
You won 60.
Thought I'd throw it at you.
All right, you won 64.
Yeah, let's go to 64 instead of this 8-5-2. It gets flat out stupid in my mind. So, all right, buddy. Later.
Appreciate it, Tom. Oh, Love it. All right, Austin. Those are two questions that I did not, well, I considered them. I've been thinking about this. Shoot, I wrote a paper on the playoff system in 1984. Somebody asked me the other night, Mark, when did you start thinking about that there should be a playoff system? I said, 1984. I was a sophomore in high school, and I wrote a paper that this should be a 16-team playoff system. Boom. Thing was about that thick. All right. Okay. So, Austin, I addressed this at some point to say that I think there are a number of ways you can do the seedings, and I did not give that consideration. I thought about it, but I thought I'm not going to go through all that. There's a number of ways you can do the seedings. You can just say we're going to do them by record, or you could say that the group of 5 always gets the 8th spot, regardless of how good they are, how good their record is. They're always going to be the 8th seed. You can line up the Power 5 champions 1 through 5 based on record, based on strength of schedule. You can have some kind of committee involved, but I would like to steer away from human beings making decisions as possible. But what's a good point in all this, Austin, is that, and I'll get the number up to call Mike 3883 in just a second. So my apologies. I usually get the number on the bottom of the screen. But you bring up an interesting point that leads me to one of the reasons we fix the scheduling is that because all these numbers and these results become more credible when the scheduling's fixed. When you've got one team that plays some ridiculously tough schedule and you got another team across the country that plays some easy schedule, then they're difficult to compare and evaluate and put through a system. But when everybody plays a fairly equal schedule, then these results mean something. And it makes the decision and the outcome more credible. So there's a lot of different ways you can seed it. And I would be up for a number of options and recommendations on how to seed these teams. In terms of where the games are played, you know the point that I couldn't think of about 10 minutes ago? When people argue that if you expand the playoff, the games aren't going to be as meaningful. And I just gave you an explanation about 10 or 15 minutes ago of why there would be more games that are meaningful as opposed to less games. The other point that makes this more meaningful for games played at the end of the season is this. If you play the first round games on campus, think of this. All right, let's say you're Georgia and you're the number 1 team in the country. And let's say you're playing the SEC championship game, and the argument is, well, Georgia doesn't care, or Georgia's playing Georgia Tech, the final regular season game of the season, and people are arguing, well, Georgia's in it. They're not going to care about this game. Big deal. What do they care? They're in the playoff. Doesn't matter to them. This is a meaningless game. Well, does Georgia want to play at home in Sanford Stadium in Athens in week 1 for their first playoff game? Or do they want to go to Wisconsin and play in mid-December in 13-degree weather in Camp Randall Stadium? What does Georgia want to do? So does that game become meaningless? No, I think it becomes very meaningful for Georgia to play Georgia Tech tough and beat them the last game of the season, because even though they thought, we're in the playoffs, we're undefeated, you may want to secure that home field advantage in the playoffs and not have to go to Seattle, Washington, play the Huskies, or Madison, Wisconsin, or have to go wherever, or play in Norman, Oklahoma against the Sooners. Think you want to play at home. So that ensures that the games are meaningful, even for the teams that have locked up playoffs, have seemingly not locked up playoff spots late in the season. You want to play on the road in a playoff game? Really? Especially SEC and ACC teams? Do you really want to go to Big Ten country or go out to the West Coast or play in the rain in Oregon in the mid-December? Do you really want to do that? Jason is saying it should be the 5 highest ranked conference champions and 3 highest ranked at large teams. First round games on campus. Seeding is based on ranking. All right, Jason, all that sounds good, except for there's one enormous flaw in that, and you're leaving it up to people to rank teams. Why do we want so badly for people to determine who's in the playoff? I don't get that. Why are we putting power into the hands of 13 people or 62 people or whatever to decide who gets ranked and therefore who makes the playoffs? Why? Mark Rogers TV, the voice of college football, who's on the line?
Sebastian.
Hey, Sebastian.
I really like the system. The only issue that I have is that we're going to make sure that their in-conference schedule is a 500 schedule, right?
Yes.
And then their out-of-conference is also a 500 schedule.
Yes.
But then we're going by strength of schedule at the end when everybody has a 500 schedule. And the schools didn't determine the schedule. It was a committee. You know what I'm saying?
No. Strength of record, not strength of schedule. We're going by strength of record.
But everybody's playing a 500 schedule. So
yep.
The person has, the team that has a better record.
Okay, Sebastian, there's I appreciate your point. You're making a good point, but there's 2 easy ways to explain it. Number one, the schedule was based on the records the previous season because you can't know what teams' records are going to be this season. So not everyone's going to have a 500 composite schedule, number one. Number two, it's based on strength of record, not strength of schedule. Those are 2 entirely different things. So strength of schedule is exactly that. You played a bunch of 10-2 teams. Your strength of schedule is ridiculously high. I played a bunch of 3-9 teams. My schedule sucks, and therefore the strength of schedule's a zillion. But strength of record is a combination that weighs the strength of schedule in combination with how dominant you were against the schedule. So let's put it this way. Let's say my team played a schedule of a winning percentage of 53%. And your team played a schedule of teams that resulted in 48% winning percentage. But you dominated your schedule. We were both 11-1. You dominated your schedule. I had a ton of like 20-17 games and squeaked by. That strength of record would compensate for that and most likely lift your team above mine in a strength of record. Does that make sense?
Oh, no. That makes a lot of sense. The issue is, one, that everybody was supposed to play an equitable schedule.
Well, you can't guarantee that because you can't predict the future. You can only...
Right, but...
You can only make a system that makes it more likely to happen than it would otherwise. Right now, it doesn't happen. My system, I guarantee that if you took all the Power 5 conference schedules and looked at how close they are and how much disparity there is between the most difficult and the easiest, and then you took my model and applied it, no, it can't predict what's going to happen, so it can't make it 500 even. But I guarantee, because it's based on what happened the season before, that it would make it much, much closer. Follow me?
Right. It's not going to be chalk year after year. But what happens is a team that has like no control over its schedule is supposed to play the same strength of schedule, supposedly, that Team B is playing, and that they're competing for a spot for a spot in the playoff. And then all of a sudden, we have another committee now looking at the strength of record, who is determining, hey, you guys had a win percentage or average margin of victory of 13 points, and your opponents had a win percentage of 53%, and the committee is going to determine if that's better or not than somebody that had a winning margin of victory of 20 points.
So
they're their opponents had a 47% winning percentage.
So Sebastian, get your mind out of a committee. We don't need a committee. The strength of record is just this.
Determining strength of record.
No.
Determining strength of record.
It's a statistic. We don't need a committee to read a statistic. You can give me the list, or I can hand it to you, and you could name the playoff teams based on saying Auburn's at 527 and Minnesota's at 488. Auburn gets the final spot. Boom. It's not a decision to be made.
That's a ranking. That's not a statistic. That's a ranking with an arbitrary, weight to what happened. You're saying, hey, your margin of victory versus your opponent's record. That's not statistic. That's a method, and that's a great method, I think. But you're still
okay. I guess I need to be
determining it by somebody's judgment and not by the objective system that I think we're all trying to reach here. Yeah.
Okay, I guess I need to be clear that you can make that a metric. It can easily be made a metric.
But you still haven't said, who determines what margin of victory. Where's the demarcation when a margin of victory, and what's the margin of victory versus a 53% winning percentage versus a 47% winning percentage?
Yeah, you're basically
your strength of schedule.
You're basically merging strength of schedule and game control and determining the combination of those two. So just because you play the toughest schedule, and I wouldn't even be that opposed to just making it strength of schedule, because if two teams are 10-2 and one, regardless of winning every game by 1 point, if they won the games, that's all that matters, win the games, then you give it to them if they played the tougher schedule. I would be okay with that as well. That would be fine. Do you want to make it simpler?
But they had no control over it. It was dictated to them who they're playing, and all of a sudden they were dictated. Hey,
don't lose.
Play, Louisiana Tech, and they had a horrible season versus the team Team B, who they're competing with for that spot, and they were scheduled to say South Florida. And all of a sudden, South Florida has a great year, and
that's why
two separate teams performing differently than they were the year before. The two teams that are competing, it dictates who's earning that playoff spot.
That's why I introduced the second component. They can control how dominant they are over those teams.
Yeah, but who's determining dominance as well? That's the only issue I have, right? Dominance is not really an objective thing.
Game control.
We know when we see it.
We can analyze game control. There's a statistic. Game control. That's a statistic.
Yeah, but that has a lot of shortcomings, right? It's not.
Well, then we look at it. We review it.
It's not a well followed or well used.
We review it.
This is determined. Yeah.
We can review it. Okay. How relevant is this? Does it make sense? If you broke it down to that degree to get to a place that you're not comfortable with my system, I'm okay with that, because I went through 7 years of playoffs, and that's really not going to come up very often. Now, if we go to 16 teams, it comes up a lot, because I went through the playoff era and made a 16-team playoff, and then you've got a lot of, we got 2 spots left, and we've got 6 teams that are all 9-3. What do we do? Then you got a lot of log jams. But in these 8 teams, nope, not a whole lot of log jams in this. Almost every year is just clear cut.
For the at-large bids, you're still having
No. That's what I'm talking about. I'm looking at since 2014. Pretty much the record determines who makes it.
Oh, that can't be. When the schedules are so different. I mean,
they're not going to be different.
They're not trying to schedule an equitable record or
opponent's record that your system will implement, which is a good thing, right? That
I
all
hope
of a sudden
so.
Baylor's don't get away with it, or trying to. It seems like they're trying to create a loophole, right? But at the same time, your analysis of the historical stuff, it shouldn't be just by the record. It should definitely be by the strength of record that you're using. How dominant you were against the type of schedule that you play. Whereas, and again, it's not going to be chalk year after year, but if the system works, it will almost be chalk, right? You don't want somebody to play a record where their opponents had a 75% winning percentage and they're competing against another team that had one with only a 25% winning percentage. And I think your system eliminates that possibility. But it seems that it's based on the luck of the draw. What type of schedule did you pull? Even though everybody supposedly has a 500 schedule, one team might play 8 teams with a winning percentage from the previous year, and the other team only plays 3, and they had no control over that. It was either by random draw or
the teams don't have control over that right now anyway. The Big Ten hands each team its 9-game schedule, and they got to play it.
Yeah, but teams like Baylor, right? They don't schedule anybody top out of conference.
True.
Right?
Yes.
And then at the end of the year, they try to say, hey, but our record, when they have a good season, say, hey, my record is 1 loss, and that should be highly valued, even though we didn't play anybody out of conference. And at least we can blame them because they were in control of the schedule, and it seems to be a pattern they've developed, right? Whereas after your system is implemented, the teams don't have any control. Whether if you play South Florida and they have a good year or a bad year, has a large impact on your ability to make the playoff spot.
There is still.
I do think it should be 16 teams. I do think it should be 16 because, well, your system solves the issue of it being an invitational for the Power 5, but it still is an invitational for the Group of 5. Whereas 16 teams is definitely not an invitational for any FBS school.
So you would include all the conference champions.
Yeah, I would have to go. I mean, if we want to be able to tell every team, hey, if you want to make the playoff, you have to win your conference, and you have 10 conference champions that make the playoff, right?
And then we're going to have, under your system, and I don't know if you were listening, maybe a half hour ago, I said the same thing. I've proposed that a number of times. I've said, if you want to go 16, I'm okay with that. And you've got 10 conference champions and you get 6 wild cards. And that means if you're the Sun Belt champion, you're in the playoff. Even if you're legitimately, realistically, the 60th best team in the country, you're still going to be in the playoff. And people would have to be okay with understanding. And Sebastian, I think you would agree with this, that if we went to that model, out of those 16 teams, we pretty much know that the 11 best teams in the country are playing in that playoff. They're the 5 conference champs and the 6 wild cards. And then after that, it's the 23rd best team. It's the 60th best team. Shoot, the MAC champion, it might be the 70th best teams. And we would just have to be, and I would be okay with that because those teams earned it within the confines of their conference structure. And if they go out and get blown out in the first round of the playoffs, so be it. Or they've got the opportunity to play through and pull off upsets and make history. I would be fine with that. And Power 5 teams, and Power 5 teams that played decent, had decent years, and Auburn went 9-3 and finished, 14th in the country and didn't make the playoffs because they didn't make that first 11. You really can't complain. If you can't make 11 spots out of the Power 5, then don't complain about it. Don't lose 3 games. So I would be I would be fine with that. I don't think most people are fine with that, because anytime I propose that, most people don't like that. They don't like Appalachian State and UAB showing up at the playoff.
Oh yeah, so it's so different. But your point, I think, is valid because, sorry to make the comparison again, but the basketball, usually the 16 seeds are their conference champion, right? But it's the conference champion of the CAA or something like that. And we don't care that they're the 16 seed and they're playing the 1 seed who won the Big Ten or the Big East. But my point was that the 18 playoffs, it still seems you haven't solved the invitational aspect of it when it comes to the group of 5 teams. And when you have years where there's going to be 2 or more group of 5 teams that go undefeated or have 1 loss, then it's almost you're grabbing or choosing who chooses the short straw, right? Because their schedules were dictated to them and they didn't have any control over it.
And the other reason I don't have an issue with that 16-team playoff is because people's complaints are, okay, Appalachian State's going to get blown out by Ohio State in the first round. I don't want to see that. Well, don't watch it because either you can just check in for the second round, and some of the first at least half of the first round games are going to be amazing. The 6-11 game and the 7-10 game and the 8-9 game for sure should be really good games. And if you don't want to see Ohio State beat Appalachian State by 4 touchdowns, that's fine. I don't think that's a negative thing. It's probably going to happen. But if you don't want to watch that game, that doesn't mean it's not a credible game and that Appalachian State didn't earn that spot. And it may take 3 years, it may take 5 years, it may take 15 years, but at some point, that game's going to be an upset, and it's going to be fun, and it's going to be historic. And UAB's going to beat Oklahoma in the first round of the playoffs.
Yeah, and not only that, if it's a 16-team playoff, I think the first round, if it's played in the same weekend or 4-day span, how Vegas, the busiest time in Vegas right now is the first weekend of the NCAA playoffs. I think the first weekend or the first round of a 16-team college playoff would probably challenge it, if not surpass it, because the interest level will be that high, of people. Sorry to talk about gambling, but the interest level would
Sure.
elevate across the country. Yeah.
We talk gambling all the time, so that's not a problem.
I don't think it happens with an 18 playoff, though. 18 playoff, it seems still, you have to navigate too many rules and whatnot. 16 teams seems better suited for that.
I would be fascinated, and I cut some videos about a month ago in which I lined up the 16-team playoff for the last 7 seasons, and I thought the matchups were phenomenal. I thought they were very interesting.
Yeah, if you can't be interested in the first round of a 16-team playoff, then you're nowhere near being a college football fan, in my opinion. But the other thing is, I made an app for the scheduling, and I'm working out the graphic user interface for it. But I'll forward it to you, and I'll probably put it on like SourceForge for everybody they can.
Okay, very cool.
Download it and use it themselves. But it shows the huge impact or wackiness that a 9-game conference schedule induces versus an 8. Yeah.
Well, I certainly, we got into that the other night, and I'm okay with 8. The 8-game formula helps my non-conference scheduling format. I think it makes it more viable, and I like that about it. But I just don't like teams and conferences missing that many games against their own conference and teams not seeing each other for 6 years in a conference. I just think that's ridiculous.
I agree with you, but the one added game really doesn't change that aspect, right? Yeah. But the issue with having odds number of games is, again, the home. You know, so half the teams play 5 home games, and the other half only play 4. And the variability that's going to happen is, you know, the teams are going to say, hey, the committee was, or, you know, the conference was in cahoots with this other team because they have a much easier schedule. They only had to play 3 teams that had a winning percentage last year, versus,
Yep.
you know, so that's like 5. Yeah.
All right, Sebastian.
It's gonna happen.
I'm going to take some of these other calls. I appreciate it. Thank you so much.
Oh yeah, sorry about that.
No, you're good. Thanks. All right, so I missed some of those calls coming in, so please call back. Sebastian was talking about 16 team, and I cut some videos. People didn't seem to really receive these videos. I thought this was going to cause a big uproar, and there we would have great debates and all that other business, but people didn't care about the 8 and 16 team playoff and what it would look like the last 7 years. But I cut those videos, and I thought the matchups were pretty intriguing. Mark Rogers TV, the voice of college football. Who's on the line?
All right, this is Mike 383.
Hey, Mike.
I came up with this idea just going through the comments and what you had on the board, and I was thinking that college football is supposed to be about getting the 4 best teams in the playoffs. Why don't we just have 8 teams and kick in instead of guaranteeing 5 Power 5 conferences in one group of 5? Let's just take the 6 best conference champions. So maybe there's one year where one of the Power 5 is struggling, and maybe 2 group of 5 get in. And then you have plus 2.
Okay, wait a minute. So you're still going with an 18 playoff, right?
Yeah.
And you're going to select the 5 best conference
I'm going to
champions.
pick the 6 best conference champions.
6
So
best.
you're always going to get a group of 5.
Okay. All right. And there's always going to be
possibility
all
of
the Power 5. All the Power 5 conferences are going to be included in that. That's never not going to happen. There's not going to be 2 group of 5 champions better than a Power 5 champion.
And that's most likely the case. But if there is a year where, let's say, you said 1 in every 10 years, let's say that there's a major upset in a conference, in a championship game. Well, maybe that's the year where 2 Power 5 champions appear to be stronger than that upset. Let's say Virginia upsets Clemson or something like that. It's just like there's a fluke. And that happens for whatever reason. Maybe that takes care of that.
All right. So a couple of years ago, Pitt was 7-5, and they were playing Clemson in the ACC championship game. So let's say they would have won that game, even though, of course, they lost by 5 touchdowns. They would have won that.
Exactly.
Let's say they won that game, and they would have been 8-5. How are you going to determine whether there are 2 group of 5 champions better than that Pitt team that won the ACC and beat the number 1 team in the country?
Well, we're just the same way that we always compare teams, where it's just look at the champions and say, well, is Pitt better than all these Power 5?
Who's going to do this?
Well, it's going to still have. There's always going to be subjectiveness, regardless. There still is.
Not really. My system doesn't have any objectivity or subjectivity to it.
Okay.
Nobody's selecting anything here. It's like an NFL. Who selects the NFL playoffs? Well, they select themselves. The NFL, there's nobody selecting the teams that make the NFL playoffs. They select themselves.
What about the 2 wild cards?
Best record, followed by head-to-head, followed by strength of record.
Okay. I just want to get your thoughts on that. Thank you.
No, I like the idea. I appreciate it.
I'll see you.
Thanks, Mike. Yes. I've got a system. It's a good system. It's not infallible. You guys have some great ideas, so that's why I like to hear them. I don't think Mike's system, I think Mike's system's fine. I just don't think it would come into play very often at all. Mark Rogers TV, the voice of college football. Who's on the line?
All right, buddy, I'm right back at you.
Oh, my. Navy Thomas, you're breaking our rule twice. One call.
Here's what I want you to do.
One call. All right, what you got?
Wipe out the bottom half of the board and change that 4 teams and get rid of all the rest of that. And just like basketball, I want to see the line that goes down from 4 teams down to go against the NAAA, just like basketball. And let's have the championship game for that.
All right, Navy. Can we bring you on here? Can I get you a flight into Connecticut and you can come and you can slap me around and take over my whiteboard and you can tell us how this needs to be done?
No, I'm just watching you. I'm just watching your show, and it just comes back up to me with this basketball thing of 64 teams or 68 teams, but they never have to play the N1AA. So just something I wanted to bring up. So let's bring that to football too. So, all right, buddy, later.
All right, Tom, appreciate it. Tom's got a special dispensation here at Mark Rogers TV, the voice of college football. I'm going to have to do this sometime. Maybe I'll make this a project tonight. Yeah, maybe I won't. I can look at my subscriber base, which is about 24,500, something in that range. And I think I can look at the entire list. I think it'll allow me to look at it in regards to who is the subscriber that has been subscribed the longest, who is still a current subscriber. And I think if I did that, I wouldn't even recognize because they don't even pay attention or come on here. But at some point, I believe that Navy Thomas would be the individual who has watched me the longest, who is still an active participant. So Navy Thomas gets a little leeway. Give him a little leeway there. Hey, Matthew, good to see you. Centerpoint Media says, I do not want to see more than 8 teams. Okay, yeah, you want to see 8, but not more than 8. I get that. I think 16 would be phenomenal, but realistically, those teams, unless we did what Sebastian and I just discussed about allowing all the conference champions in. We're talking Mountain West, we're talking Conference USA, we're talking, okay, listen to this. Actually, this was a coincidence that I saw my notes here from looking at playoffs. Let's just take 2015. Think back to 2015. What was going on in 2015? Well, Alabama beat a #1 Clemson team in the national championship game. Michigan State and Oklahoma were the other 2 playoff teams. Ohio State was definitely one of the top 3 teams, but they missed the playoffs. 1 loss. Stanford was really good. They won the Rose Bowl. Okay, that was 2015 in a nutshell. Okay. If you include the group of 5 in the playoff, all the conference champions in the group of 5, this would be your playoff system. Sebastian, are you listening? 2015. #1 seed, Clemson, 13-0, taking on number 16 seed, Arkansas State, Sun Belt champion, 9-3. Your 2 seed was Alabama, 12-1, taking on Western Kentucky, the Conference USA champion, 11-2. Your 3 seed is Michigan State, Big Ten champion, 12-1, taking on Bowling Green out of the MAC champion, 10-3. Your 4 seed, Oklahoma, 11-1, taking on Mountain West champion, San Diego State, 10-3. Your 5 seed, Ohio State, your first wild card, 11-1, taking on Oklahoma State out of the Big 12, the 12 seed, 10-2. Your 6 seed, Iowa, another Big Ten team, 12-1, taking on Notre Dame, 10-2, 11 seed. And then your 7-10 game, Stanford, the Pac-12 champion, 11-2, taking on Florida State, the 2nd seed in the ACC. That would be a nice first-round matchup, Stanford, Florida State in 2015. And then your 8-9 game, was North Carolina, who lost the ACC championship game at 11-2, taking on Houston, the number 1 team in the group of 5 at 12-1. That would be your 2015 playoff with all the group of 5 champions included. All right, who's on the line?
Hey, Mark, this is D-Rock Irish.
Hey, D-Rock Irish. Great to hear from you.
First of all, I just wanted to say that you got yourself a hell of a show there. I skipped dinner tonight. My wife's pissed off, but so what? But I had some questions in regards to your scheduling and with Notre Dame. Do you see Notre Dame in a 16 playoff format? Because looking at your 8, it looks as though they would be left out. Your thoughts on that?
Well, they wouldn't be left out entirely. They would be eligible for one of those 2 wild card spots. So I went through this. They would have made it in 2020 and in 2018. The same 2 that they made it. So I did go through this since 2014, took my formula and I applied it to 2014 through 20, and Notre Dame would have made the same 2 years that they did make.
Okay, so looking at their independent schedule, because I've been following for the last hour and a half, and it seems as though that if they're not in a conference, it's going to be a tougher shot for them to get into your system. Am I correct in saying that?
I don't think that's definitive. I think we'd have to go year to year and see, because if they were in a conference, they'd most likely have to win that conference.
Okay. A follow-up to this one is that as a current independent and looking at the schools that are playing out of conference, if they play Notre Dame, that builds their resume, but does that also build Notre Dame's resume, I guess?
Well, it depends who. So Notre Dame is typically a 10-11 win team, or recently they have been. So, of course, that builds the resume of the other team, yes. But it all depends on who the other team is as to whether that builds Notre Dame's resume. You'd have to give me an example.
Well, I heard you mention a couple of times about USC thrown in there, and they are going to play 5 ACC teams each year. I think contractually they have a contract scheduled for 5 ACC teams. How does that all play in, I guess? And I'm leaving it kind of open-ended right now because, quite honestly, Mark, this is the first show I've ever been called in live. So that should be a double thumbs up for you, too, for your show.
I appreciate that, D-Rock Irish. I appreciate that.
Right. I mean, heck, I'm online for 2.5 hours listening to your show, and though I may disagree on a couple of things, I understand where you're coming from, and you have a lot of knowledge out there, wealth of knowledge, and I'm kind of taken back at this. I'm retired now, and I can kind of go ahead and sit back and kind of listen in on the callers and on what you have to say, and I'm really impressed on the data that you have brought to this platform, and seeing Notre Dame's schedule, and I'm sure you follow them because you mention them quite often, on your platform. It seems as though Notre Dame, I call it relevant. And I think a couple of shows ago you mentioned about Notre Dame, or not Notre Dame per se, but what does relevancy mean?
Mm-hmm.
And I still believe that Notre Dame is a very, very relevant program, but how is it relevant to them in relationship to a playoff, such as what you propose? And do you think maybe a 16-team playoff would benefit Notre Dame more than an 8-team playoff?
I believe since Notre Dame does not play in a conference, that so a 16, let's understand just the math of it, is that a 16-team playoff benefits everybody because it just allows 12 more spots as opposed to just 4 more spots. So it benefits everyone. In looking at the previous 7 seasons, I think that the school that's going to be, at least if this continues, if this trend continues, the team that's going to be most aided by an 18 playoff is Georgia, because they're barely missing. But when it comes to Notre Dame, basically 10-2 is 10-2 and 9-3 is the dividing line if you go to a 16-team playoff for Notre Dame. That every year they would go 10-2, they would make the playoff. Every year that they went 9-3, they would be in a bucket full of teams that would have to be selected. I took that 16-team model and applied it to 7 seasons, and 9-3 was that dividing line where it was like, okay, we only have 2 spots left, and we got 7 9-3 teams. Okay, who would make it and who would not? That was usually where that 16-team format, how that played out.
Okay. So taking a look, excuse me, taking a look at Notre Dame, then you would say that a 16-team playoff format would benefit them more than an 18. I mean, just your personal and professional opinion, and based on your math, which I think you do a heck of a job on.
Yes, so Notre Dame needs to go undefeated or lose 1 game to make a 4-team playoff. 10-2 gives them a chance, although a less than 50-50 chance to make an 18 playoff, and 10-2 ensures them in a playoff situation in 8 teams, and even 9-3, they would have a shot of qualifying. Does that answer your question?
Right, and
okay.
Yeah, it does, Mark. And also, I've been checking some other online sites, especially I think Nathan Erbach and I know a couple of other sites on Notre Dame sites. They mentioned about Notre Dame's schedule and basically being an independent. They basically have to be 11-1 or even 12-0 to run the table in the current system. I think that if that's the route they're going to go ahead and take, it's like you can't afford to lose the game, and if you lose the game, you better lose early and then win big all the way through. I don't know what your thoughts about that would be.
Notre Dame is more dependent than anybody else in college football in the Power 5 on needing their schedule and the better teams on their schedule to go out and have good seasons.
Right.
In most seasons, 4 of the 5 conference champions are making the playoffs. So if you make the playoffs, or if you win your conference, you have an 80% chance of making the playoffs, or slightly less than 80% chance of making the playoffs. Whereas if you're Notre Dame, basically, if you go undefeated, you're going to make the playoffs. If you lose a game, then your season's being evaluated, your season. So from what I can think of Notre Dame's schedule coming up in 2021, they would be, let's say they go 11-1. They're going to be very dependent on whether, did Wisconsin, how well did Wisconsin play in the Big Ten? Did Wisconsin turn out to be 7-5, or did Wisconsin turn out to be 11-1? And then all those ACC teams that Florida State, that Notre Dame plays, they're very much more than any other team dependent on the evaluation of their schedule.
And you know what? I agree with you 100%, Mark, on that. I mean, you're spot on. There's a lot of variables thrown in the Notre Dame schedule, and I've been a lifelong Notre Dame fan, and quite honestly, they've got to run the table. if they don't run the table, basically the chances are nil. And you pretty much confirm that, and I just want to kind of get your thoughts on that. And I'll probably call in down the road on this, but you know, you just do a great job, and I know that you got other people out there that want to call in, and you got me glued. You got me glued and tuned in to this network. So you're doing a great job, and I just want to go ahead and say thank you for your comments.
Appreciate that so much, T-Rock Irish. Have a good night.
All right, you too. Take care.
To respond to, okay, Matthew Bras, good comment there about no buys. Shoot, I lost the comment coming in from, there was a comment made concerning a 16-team playoff and buys. Oh, shoot. I lost it. I just had it posted. Okay. No buys. Anybody out there that's a proponent of buys in the college football playoff, you probably watch too much NFL. And number two, you don't understand the ramifications of a buy in the college football playoff. So I can go through this now, or you can just check out the video. I just posted a video like 4 days ago, and it just says no buys. And I hope that will clearly explain to you why we should not have buys in the playoff system. They don't work. They do not work. Jason Osborne brings me to a point there where he says about 16th ranked team in the country out of 130 is a scrub. We've got a big problem. Because I know even I have people even pushing back on an 18 playoff. There's people that just want to keep it at 4 or go to 6, which of course includes buys, and that doesn't work. Think of it this way, and I know it's not a perfect analogy, and I know it's not. We don't want to compare college football to professional sports, but let's just understand that in the NFL, you got 12 out of 32 teams make the playoffs. That's about 35%. Major League Baseball, what is it? Is it 10 out of 30? 33% of the league makes the playoffs. On and on and on. It's usually like 35, 40% of the league makes the playoffs. In college football, even if we went to 8 teams, 8 out of 130, that is 6%. You still have to be excelling the cream of the crop. It's the top 6%, even at 8 teams, to make the playoffs. You've got to be the top 5 or 6%. And we're talking about teams being horrible and not belonging because they're only the 6th best team in the country. Thank you, Mark. About the only thing I missed there. Well, I missed the people. I missed the people, and I miss the paycheck too. But we're taking care of that. Sentiments in 06. I've stated this a few times. I used to not have an issue with Notre Dame not playing in a conference as it pertains to the playoff. As it pertains to other things, I did have a problem with that, them not playing in the conference. But as it pertains to the playoff, I used to not have an issue with Notre Dame not playing in the conference. And the basic reason was Notre Dame schedules as tough as anybody in the country. I'm not saying every year that they schedule the toughest or one of the toughest schedules, but their approach to scheduling, you cannot in any way debate that they go out to schedule difficult. and challenging schedules. USC, Stanford, the 5 ACC games, on and on and on and on. Okay. But if those teams turn on them, meaning look at the last time Notre Dame made the playoff prior to 2020. 2018, Notre Dame went undefeated, but USC was down, 5-7. Stanford was down. Virginia Tech was down. Florida State was down. Somebody else in there was down. So their schedule wasn't that tough. But it wasn't that they didn't intend to schedule a difficult slate. It just turned out that way. So what happened in 2018 for me to change my mind on Notre Dame was Notre Dame's 12-0. They're going to the playoff. It's conference championship game weekend, and I'm sitting there watching Oklahoma, Texas in the Big 12 championship game, knowing that Ohio State is playing Northwestern later, and that either Oklahoma or Ohio State's going to make it, and one of them is not, if they both win their games as expected, and they did. And Oklahoma won a fairly close game that was decided in the last 5 minutes. Ohio State won a game fairly comfortably. But anyway, I knew Oklahoma and Ohio State are both going to finish 12-1 as conference champions, but one is going to get left out because Notre Dame is just sitting on their rear ends during conference championship game weekend, and they're in. They're done. 12-0. Okay. So I had an issue with that, especially considering that Notre Dame has ties with the ACC. And in that particular season, we watched, listen to this, we watched in the first round of the playoffs, Clemson beat Notre Dame 30-3. What should that have been? What game should that have been? We all just saw it in December. That game should have been the ACC championship game. That would have solved all the problems. If Notre Dame was in the ACC, then Clemson and Notre Dame would have played in the ACC championship game, and Oklahoma and Ohio State would have both made the playoff as conference champions. And there wouldn't have had to be this ridiculous argument between Ohio State and Oklahoma. They're both 12-1. They won the Big Ten and the Big 12, and Ohio State had this really ugly loss against Purdue, but they've got better wins, and who should make it? No, they both would have made it. Boom, they both make it. It's another situation in which there had to be one team that was deserving that gained entry into the playoffs, but another team that was just as deserving left out. And in that particular year, it was because Notre Dame was not in a conference and should have been playing Clemson in the ACC championship game, and instead they were playing Clemson in the first round of the playoffs. And so instead of us having what most likely would have been a better game and would have had another quality team in the playoff, we had what we had. Rod Farvel is really good for delivering these lists to us. National championship game ratings since 2014. So this is how many people watch the game. This isn't necessarily the TV ratings, but it's the same deal. It's actually more understandable by people that aren't in television. By people that aren't in television, it's just flat out how many people watch the game. 2014, Ohio State and Oregon, 34 million. The next year, Alabama, Clemson, 26 million. 2016, Alabama, Clemson again, 25 million. 2017, Alabama, Georgia was up to 28 million. Then 2018 was the Clemson, Alabama game, 25 million. And then 2019 was LSU, Clemson, 25 million. And then 2020, a dip to 19 million with Ohio State and Alabama. And then somebody later in the chat said everybody was home. Why weren't people watching the game? That's curious. Interesting. Silent Chaos. Mark, are you going to the Slop Olympics in Atlanta? I don't know a whole lot about it. I know that I was given not necessarily like this formal invitation, but somebody reached out to me, whether that was Uncle Lou or Pigskin Pete. That was a long, long time ago. And I didn't really think much of it at the time in regards to all that travel and so forth. But I guess the bottom line answer would be no. I'm sure it will be entertaining. I don't know what it involves, but I'm sure knowing that those, I don't know anybody else who's involved. Maybe you've seen a list. I don't think I've seen a list, but I know that those two guys are involved. And if those two guys are involved, I'm sure it's going to be a heck of a lot of fun, entertaining, and it's going to be crazy and all those other good things. And I would love to take part in it if it wasn't inconvenient. So yeah, I'm sure it's going to be a whole lot of fun and crazy and cool. Yeah, but I don't know what they're doing. Ronan, wasn't Miami, Florida State the most viewed game of the week a few years back? Both teams had at least 2 losses. Both teams suck, but people saw the names and were like, ooh. Not really aware of that, Ronan. I do know that there was the Miami Notre Dame game of 2017 was highly rated. It wasn't the highest rated of the year, but it was up there. It's in the top 5 to 10. I do also know that Miami and Florida State once played the highest rated game on ESPN, but that was before ESPN started to air playoff games and Rose Bowls around 2010. I believe that was like the 06 Miami Florida State game. Caleb, do I think that Nebraska will go back to the Big 12? I don't believe so. I'm an Oklahoma fan, missed the rivalry, and they're playing again in 2021. Yeah, they're playing twice here coming up, home and home. I think Nebraska pretty much belongs in the Big 12, but they've made that decision. They made it based on money and based on, from what I understand, not enjoying being in a climate and a conference in which Texas was given favoritism. All right, so I wanted to jump on tonight and unveil my college football playoff format. I appreciate everyone's input. A lot of people had good things to say, a lot of interesting questions that we got to the bottom of, and a lot of alternate ideas, theories, applications that could be considered. All right, everyone, appreciate it. Like, comment, share the videos on social media. Man, I can't emphasize that enough. I got to think, we only have 40 people on here right now, but probably by the end of the time in which people will watch this, about 1,000 people will watch this, hopefully more. That just about all of you are on Facebook and on Twitter. If you share these videos on social media, it helps us build the channel immensely. So please give that some consideration, whether that's just your favorite team or certain videos that really resonate with you or all of them. Please share the videos on social media. That will help us build the channel. Also, keep in mind that you can contribute at Venmo, PayPal, and Cash App. Venmo, PayPal, and Cash App. Just go to MarkRogersTV. If you've got an idea or a connection to a sponsor please hit me up at MarkRogersTV at Gmail. You can always hit me up at MarkRogersTV at Gmail. All right? For our folks on Patreon, we will be going live, exclusive live stream coming up this weekend. I'll have to determine when, either Saturday or Sunday. So please join the Voice of College Football community on Patreon. Watch parties, exclusive live streams, insider look, predictions, all of that right there on Patreon, 16 cents per day. And again, help us build the channel. We'll be live next Monday at noon Eastern time at the latest. Maybe I'll go live tomorrow, maybe on Sunday, we'll see. But in regards to the off-season schedule, it's definitely going to be Monday at noon with Pigskin Pete, noon Eastern time. And I think I'm going to produce a video and I'm going to lay out the off-season schedule so everybody's understanding of when I'm going to be here. All right, great to see everyone. Great to see everyone. All right. And one last time, Matthew tells everyone, please hit that thumbs up button. And we'll see you next time. Appreciate it.